What's going on, you guys? It's Lincoln here. Welcome back to the channel where we talk about building net worth primarily through investing and options trading and kind of generating income from those strategies. As always, I do have my website linked up here in the description, so if you guys ever want to use that as a resource, I think it's pretty good. Talk about ballerinas and making money and that sort of thing. So that is always there. In this video, we're going to be talking about why I buy deep in the money calls. I'm going to go over a trade that I just made and kind of the P&L behind that trade. And then I'm going to compare that to if I would have bought stock instead, just buying regular shares. And then compare that to an at the money leaps as well. So I buy deep in the money leaps, and I'm going to compare why I do that versus buying the at the money leaps. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about how to exit the trade. So before we get too far into it, I'm going to show a little screencast of the last video. You guys remember I talked about the two laws of options, kind of the two laws that I primarily focus on is the at the money bell curve and time decay, and those kind of guide and influence how I do all of my options trading, whether that's buying or selling. So I mentioned it in that last video that is the reason why I buy deep in the money leaps. So you're going to see that a little bit in action today. If you guys haven't seen that video, check it out and watch that little, I don't know, couple 5-minute clip or whatever it is, because I think it is very helpful and will give some good context to this video. And then before I actually break down this trade, I want to remind you that this is my entire portfolio. You can see about $45,000 in it, and I only have a few leaps. Those are these positions in yellow, few deep in the money leaps. The rest I am long shares. You can see about 20% of my portfolio is just in the Vanguard Total World ETF. So remember that context as well. This is not my entire portfolio. I recommend doing this as well. These are, you can see that Apple leaps, and then this new position. I got about 30% of my portfolio in these deep in the money leaps plays right now, which is definitely at the high end of the range that I want to be in. I will not be buying any more of these until I add some more cash to my portfolios. So just so you have that context, and let's jump into that trade. Alright, so here is the screen recording on my phone of me buying that deep in the money leaps on Micron. You can see I scroll all the way out to January 20, 2023 as far as I can go. And I'm going to go ahead and look for a strike. So as a rule of thumb, the major strikes, like $60, $50, $40, those will have more volume and more open interest than the other strikes, just because more people are choosing them. So that's always where I'm going to look. I'm going to look for at least an 85 delta with decent volume. So that $50 strike looked pretty good, which is what I ended up settling on. But this is me double checking all of those things, making sure that is the one that I want to buy. So it is. So I'm going to go ahead and select it. I'm just going to buy one of them, and then you can see the bid and the ask there are pretty wide, so I'm going to try and go somewhere in between. I don't have to go straight in between, but I'm going to try and get it filled right at the 34.35. You can see me right there, and I send that in, and this is kind of surprising. I got filled right away. I expected that to sit open for a while and wait for a fill. Okay, so now that you've seen how I bought that deep in the money leaps, let's go ahead and look at my portfolio right now, and I can quick just run over. You guys haven't seen these calendar spreads before. I'm kind of messing around with these right now, so I'll let you know how those go, but be on the lookout for those in a future video. I'm just kind of testing a few things out. Other than that, I got my two deep in the money leaps and the covered calls that I've sold on those, so those are just poor man's covered call positions. And then here is that new Micron $50 call that I bought. There is the position. So just so you guys remember, and I have that on this page as well. If you go to my website, which is just networthwell.com, and hit the options and then advanced strategies and examples, I talk about buying deep in the money leaps right here. So everything I talk about in this video is going to be in this little section here. I also have quite a few different articles that I've written on deep in the money leaps on this site. And I also have a few videos that I'll link in the description below on these deep in the money leaps. So just to highlight a couple of the big benefits of these. Number one, they serve as leverage. Okay, I'll go over this in a second with the profit and loss. But basically, you can control quite a few more shares for a smaller capital outlay than you would otherwise, which kind of jumps into point number two. That means you have a lower max loss, and then the money that you save by buying these contracts, you can go do something else with and earn a return with it. So that's the opportunity cost. And then buying deep in the money gives you super low extrinsic value premiums, so your break-even points are super low. And I will show that again when we go over the comparison against the at-the-money leaps. Okay, so let's jump into the profit and loss diagram real quick. You guys have seen this before. I love my spreadsheets. So over here we have the stock price, and then we have the stock, the actual P&L of the stock, if it's at different strike prices, that return, and then the same thing for my deep in the money leaps, and then the difference here. So when I bought this, Micron was trading at $80.42 per share. I paid $34.35 for this contract. $34.35 right there, okay? $34.35 per share. That gives me a break even of $84.35. You can see that right there, okay? $84.35. So that is just under a 5% premium from where Micron is trading at today, or when I bought this. So I'm comparing, the comparison is between 100 shares and my deep in the money leap. So the delta on a share is just 1, okay? For every dollar the stock price increases, how much will the underlying move, okay? So the delta on a share is 1, because 1 share, if the stock price moves up $1, it'll move up $1. The delta on my call is about 0.87. You can see it's a little bit lower now, 0.86. Okay, so we're just going to stick with 0.87 because that's where I bought it at. So that's the equivalent of about 87 shares. So if Micron increases by $1, I can expect to see about an 87-cent increase per share. Okay, so that's all that means. And then the premium, this is the extrinsic value premium I was talking about. So this is the difference, equals $84.35 minus the current stock price. That's at $3.93. So that's all that premium means. And then capital outlay. So if I were to buy 100 shares of Micron at $80.42, that would cost me just over $8,000. Whereas this contract cost me $3,435. So that's the capital outlay difference. And then we can see the price per share. Since I'm controlling 87 shares and I paid $34.35, I'm getting the equivalent of about $38.60 per share. Whereas, actually I did that wrong. I'm getting the equivalent of $39.48 per share, whereas this one's $80.42 per share. You're just buying the stock at the stock price, okay? So your max loss is the capital outlay. So obviously you can see quite a bit less here for my call, and then the break-even's at that $84.35, whereas obviously if you bought shares, it would be at the same price that you paid for them. Okay, and then over here I have the comparison. So if I were to spend $3,435 buying shares, I could only pick up about 43 shares worth. Okay, so I'm more than doubling my exposure to Micron for the exact same capital outlay. And that is the leverage of buying these deep in the money leaps, way less capital, and then obviously max loss is lower. And then over here we just have all the differences. So obviously if the stock goes down to 0, these are both going to be worthless. So you're going to lose $8,000 if you would have bought 100 shares, or I would lose $3,435 if I bought this call. Okay, so at the $50 strike, you're down $3,042. These are all at expiration. Okay, so if on January 20th, 2023, Micron is trading for $50 per share, and you bought 100 shares, you'd be down $3,042, about 38%. If you would have bought the $50 call, obviously if it expires at $50, the call's worthless, so you would have lost your full $3,435. Obviously 100% return looks worse than 38% return, but the difference is only $393, okay? Guess what? That's the exact same as the extrinsic value premium. Okay, but then we look at these percentage returns, and this is what matters. So anything positive, okay, and then anything above that $50 call, this contract is going to be expiring in the money at least somewhat. It'll be obviously less than we paid for it. Break even's at $84.35, so anything below $84.35, I'm going to be in the red. Okay, and then you can see obviously the percentage gains, and this is the leverage I'm talking about. Since your capital outlay is so much less buying this call, and you have still a crazy amount of exposure, 87% of the exposure of 100 shares, and about 40% of the cost, this is the leverage, okay? Look at these returns. Micron gets all the way up to $150 a share, you're making almost 200%, whereas this one is just about 90%, okay? So that is the leverage of buying deep the money leaps versus buying stock. Now let's compare it to buying an at the money leaps. Okay, so Micron just over 80 bucks a share today, so let's compare it to the $80 call. Okay, let's start over here. So the $80 call, and just so you guys know that I actually looked at this, and it is right here. You can see $15.98 a share right now. So we'll switch back over to our graph and compare these two contracts. So Micron at 80.42, the $50 call we know I bought for $34.35. We could have bought the $80 call for $15.95 a share. Okay, so the break evens, $95.95 a share or $84.35 a share. Okay, so for mine, we need Micron to increase by 5% in the next year and a half. If you were to buy the at the money leaps, in order to be in the money at expiration, you would need Micron to increase by almost 20% per share. Okay, obviously the break even is much higher. So delta we said is 0.6 versus 0.87, 60 shares versus 87. There's the extrinsic value premium, and then capital outlay. Okay, that's just the cost of the contract times 100, $15.95. So obviously a lot less for the at the money leaps. Price per share obviously going to be less, but not that much less. Max loss going to be less because the capital outlay is less. Break even is much higher for the at the money leaps. Okay, when I'm buying these leaps contracts, it is to replace stock. It's to replace owning shares. If you're buying these at the money leaps, the biggest difference is going to be that you're speculating. Okay, you're getting it for a much cheaper price, but you're speculating. Micron needs to move by 20% in the next year and a half for you just to break even, whereas I need it to move less than 5%. And so I'm buying deep in the money leaps to replace stock. Yes, it costs more than buying at the money leaps, but it is far less speculation. Okay, it is far more similar to actually buying shares. And you can see that right here. So the cost of the contract, you're getting at 2.6% of the $15.95 is intrinsic value. Whereas on my deep in the money leaps, 88%, almost 89% of this $34.35 is intrinsic value. Okay, so obviously that translates to lower break evens. So that is the big difference between these two contracts. And then same thing, you can see I broke down the differences in the results at expiration at different stock prices. Okay, so obviously if Micron absolutely moons, your percentages are going to be much higher buying these at the money leaps or out of the money leaps. Don't kid yourself, you're not simulating owning stock if you're buying at the money leaps or out of the money leaps. You have to buy deep in the money leaps if you want to replace owning shares. Okay, now let's jump over and look at how I would exit this option. So just like buying any, I'm going to get rid of this real quick, just like buying any call, if you were to buy an out of the money call, you could just sell it back anytime between now and expiration and the expiration date. Okay, so any time between now, January 20, 2023, I can sell to close. So when I bought to open, I paid a debit. I paid a $34.35 debit per share. That represents my max loss because I own this contract. Okay. If I want to exit this trade, I'm going to just hit sell to close. So you can do it from this screen. Obviously, it's already got it because it knows what it is. So I own one contract. I would put in my limit price. You can see the bid and the ask are pretty wide on these, so you might have to wait a while to get a fill. If you want to do it from the actual options chain, you can go down here to January 20th, 2023, flip over to sell a call, and find that $50 strike. Select it there, continue, same thing. Okay, so minimum credit, I'm selling to close, receiving a credit. Every time you sell an option, it's a credit. Every time you buy an option, it's a debit. I can also, if I wanted to, another way to exit this would be to exercise this option. I don't want to do that because there is extrinsic value. There's time premium left in this, so I don't want to exercise this because I would, okay, when you exercise an option, you're only getting the intrinsic value. So I would be getting $30.08 per share of intrinsic value if I exercise this option. So I'd be throwing away a little bit more than $400, okay, $432. That's what I'd be throwing away if I exercise this option right now. If I wanted to exercise my Dropbox call, since this one is so much farther in the money, you can see the delta is at 0.96. There's going to be a lot less extrinsic value baked into the premium to this one. There is $20.22 of intrinsic value, which means there's about 50 cents total of extrinsic value. So if I wanted to exercise this one, I could. I'd be throwing $50 away, but obviously it's quite a bit less. So if you want to exit deep in the money leaps, you sell to close, receiving a credit, or you can exercise. You can do that at any point between now and the expiration date. And just so you guys can see a recap on the portfolio, I did sell all of my Micron shares out of here. Obviously, this is a plenty large position of Micron, about 8%. It's a little bit more than I wanted. wanted to allocate to Micron, but it's going to have to do for now. But I did sell my Micron shares. They're no longer in my Roth IRA, so I'm sitting on a little bit of cash. I need to update this sheet because this is what I write right now. But I am sitting on a bit more cash in my Roth IRA from that sale, and I got to figure out what I'm going to do with that cash. So thank you guys for watching. Hit that like button if you're feeling generous. Subscribe if you want to see more like it, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.